So a lot of times people come up and they'll ask me questions about Chan Tai San and about training and how it was during our time and what it was like, different from today. And I figured I'd talk about that a little bit. Uh, he was a really, really good instructor in that, for me, someone who already had experience, he was able to get a lot of information across to me that I wouldn't have been able to get from someone else. He was very open, uh, didn't have a preconceived notion of who he wanted to teach or what he was going to teach him. And he didn't have a set curriculum. It was, he met you, he got an idea of what skill level you had and what you brought to the table, and then he'd start teaching from there. Some of it was also whatever he felt like teaching at that moment. But the best things about him was he wasn't a perfect instructor. I call him the kung fu movie teacher because he's that crazy guy who's got all those skills and nobody wants to deal with him because it's not easy. He didn't have a lot of patience for beginners. He didn't teach in the normal sense now that we see a school and preset classes and a curriculum. It wasn't like that. It wasn't like that at all. The other thing was he's a flawed human being. It wasn't the most moral or proper person. He came up. He was an orphan really early on in life. He had to do a lot of things in his life to get by. So you begin to understand, and then you begin to see some of the ties to the organized crime and everything in the Chinese community. So you begin to see how some of these people, even though they're good people, they had to do whatever they had to do. Teaching-wise, he would get groups together. People would go to his house, or when we met him in a restaurant in Chinatown with my older training brother, Stephen Lorette. And I said, "Oh, who is he? He's great." I mean, he came in animated with this big hat and that rice field hat, screaming and yelling. And I was like, "Who is that guy?" And he said, "That's Chan Tai San. He's crazy." I was like, "All right, he's crazy." He goes, "But he's got the shit. He knows. He's got a lot of material, and he's good at it, and he's dangerous." And I was like, "Okay, well, I'd like to study with him." And he goes, "He would love to train with you. You have skills." And really it came about us entertaining him and him entertaining us with a big language barrier in the middle. But we would go up. First we brought him out to where we were training, myself, Mike Martinez, Stephen Loren, and David Ross. We rented a place and we were teaching people and training ourselves. And back in the day you needed a place, especially in the wintertime, where you were going to train. So we would find a place and rent it and teach classes, and what we got in money we would take some for ourselves and pay the location. And that's how a lot of us, especially 18, 20, 25 years old, that's how we started. That's how we got off the ground. And Chan Tai San would teach you directly. You would practice, you would start doing your stuff, and he would start teaching you something. You'd keep working on it until he said it was enough. And you just kept training. And we already had basics, we already had technique, we already had ideas. But for us, it was like meeting the teacher's teacher. So I mean, in terms of that, he was phenomenal. He was larger than life, could explain anything, could show you the skills, tell you a story about somebody who used it, or himself, or he used to love to tell stories about him getting beat and fighting. It's funny, I hear more stories about his exploits from people that know him or know the stories from Tai San than I ever did from him. He was a very humble guy. Even though he was Chan Tai San, he was a humble guy. Didn't lack for self-confidence, but he also didn't speak of himself as the greatest thing since sliced bread. I think in this day and age, we really need more of that. We started going up to the China Association where it was all Chinese. We'd go up there and train, and they'd ask us, "Why are you teaching Americans?" And when we were there, we'd run into Carl Albright and Franklin and just a slew of people, GU, all these people coming through to train with Chan Tai San. I mean, he was a character, and people could assess, and they knew he was the guy. When we were going up there, Chinese would ask him, "Why are you teaching Americans?" And he says, "Because the Chinese kids don't want to learn." Look, and say, here, show him monk spade, show him this hand form, show him these techniques. And they just sit there and watch us, and we'd be show chickies, jumping around doing stuff. And the idea was that the Americans were showing their worth. I went to China to study Chinese martial arts, to never meet the person I wanted to meet until I got back from China in '85 to meet Chan Tai San. That was the person I really wanted to study with. For me, that was the greatest thing. And I kept studying, and he started me in Charlie Fight, and the weapons I was learning were Lama. That's the way he was. Then he decided I was supposed to switch back to Lama and stay on the Lama path. And he and Stephen and Chenzi and I continued that path, and that's why we opened Lama Kung Fu. That's how we started. David was always training, and he went to DC, and he kept training and kept studying with Sifu, but he never really wanted to teach. And then he came and he started working with us a bit. And Michael and Gus had opened a school in Long Island. That was the Charlie Futt School. Even though they tried to do both systems, it was primarily a Charlie Futt school. But Sifu was a person, just to give you some background on him, he had fought in the national tournament in '49 and '53. He was that kind of guy. He was the kind of guy that you could hang out with. He was a really, really cool character with his cigarette. We used to find him in Brooklyn, hanging out with old Italian guys that were, a little mobbed up, and they understood him. They totally understood him as a human being. He used to teach us, basics and how you use this for fighting and how that. I would do the same techniques over and over and over again. I would repeat forms, and he'd say, "Don't you want to learn something new?" Because he was teaching somebody else something. "No, I want to work on this." I was always somebody who wanted to perfect whatever I had. I wasn't interested in getting more material. I was interested in where the source was, where I was getting my info from. And he was the guy I wanted to get my information from. And because I was working on the techniques, he would show me application. He would work stuff with me. I remember the first time we went up to do a demo with him. He said, "You got to come up and do this with me." I had no clue of what he wanted to do. And my Cantonese was minimal. So he's yelling at me in Toisanese, "Your mother this, you're this, that, you get it." And I just kind of followed along. And since I was raised in an environment where, you follow, you respect your elders and all that, he and I never had a problem. And I just worked my ass off. That was what I did. And luckily he graced me with some pretty interesting Kung Fu. Other people got other kinds of Kung Fu, and that's great. I got what I got, they got what they got. And I'm pretty happy about, where I came out in it. And I never thought about going to study with anybody else. It's just, I've trained in other things, trained in boxing, trained in kickboxing, trained in other things, but never changed system. And he gave me other stuff. He gave me some Jiao Ga, and he gave me Bak Mei, and he gave me other things. But I stuck to what he told me, what I was supposed to do. I did Lama, and I have quite a bit of Charlie Futt, which I'm going to be teaching out more now in the next coming years and all that. Just to give a little background on the way, coming up with Chan Tai San, not speaking, he didn't speak English. We paid 2 years of Cantonese lessons to be able to speak with him, stay with him. He lived with me for 6 months. There's stories that just come up that nobody can possibly believe. Anyway, that's just a little tidbit on Chan Tai San.